This game manages to be amazing and annoying at the exact same time. Hey, it's Zay, and today we're going to be going over Gotham Knights. Gotham Knights is relatively recent, released in October of last year. Majority of gamers were not excited for the game, but I wanted to give it a try, and it was surprisingly good. However, the longer I played the game, the more problems I discovered. There will be story spoilers, so if you're still playing the game or intend to play it eventually, I suggest you come back to this video after you've had a chance to play the game. Disclaimer: if you find yourself in the admittedly unique situation of having not already seen this story and you choose to go forward with this is on you. So hopping right into the story, the premise of Gotham Knights is actually really good. What would Gotham City be like if Batman died? How would his sidekicks carry on defending the city without him? Gotham Knights goes over this fairly well. Nightwing, Red Hood, Batgirl, and Robin regroup with Alfred to reinstate order in Gotham. I think the line delivery sometimes comes off as a little stiff, but overall, I think it's really well told. So, the Gotham Knights story starts out with Batman getting jumped by Ra's al Ghul in the Batcave. And pretty much throughout the whole fight, it's clear that Ra's al Ghul has the upper hand. Batman does a little something to defend himself, but he's mostly getting rocked. Batman gets wounded several times, but Ra's is pretty unfazed by everything that happens throughout the fight. Here comes a part that actually really irks me. See, Batman blocks the blade, but then I guess to kind of like fake Ra's out, he stabs himself so he can get closer and headbutt, and I hate that. I hate that. Why? You blocked it. Just move. Why? He sold. I'm not gonna lie, he sold. So I guess after stabbing himself, he realizes, oh shoot, I can't win the fight with a hole in my chest, and so he decides that he's just gonna blow up the Batcave instead, and he uses his little gauntlet self-destruct sequence, and then they both die. I'm not mad at this necessarily. It feels like Batman could have not stabbed himself, and you know, he might have lasted a little longer, found another option. I don't know. It's just, yeah. This scene's kind of cool though. And then, in order to quell any conspiracy theories, they do actually show his body. He is in fact dead. However, that didn't actually convince me because he just got killed by Ra's al Ghul, and Ra's al Ghul has Lazarus pits, so I felt like it was more of a question of when he comes back, not if. At this point, the majority of the game becomes investigating Batman's last case, which was the Court of Owls. The basic gist behind the Court of Owls is that it's a group of rich people who come together and use their money and influence to make changes they think need to be made and kill people they think need to die. And they accomplish a lot of this using undead warriors called Talons. And so Talons are sort of your main antagonists throughout the game. It gets progressively worse as you deal damage to the Court of Owls. They start to lose control over their zombies and they start running free in the city. I will say they do an excellent job in making the Court of Owls seem threatening. You end up hunting down the leader, known as the Voice, and with some effort, you capture him. However, he's unconcerned as he doesn't think any of the charges will stick. This is about the time that the game introduces you to the secondary and final antagonist group of the game, the League of Assassins. The Voice is assassinated while being apprehended by the police, and you come to find out Talia al Ghul was responsible.
We murdered him.
Turns out she has a Lazarus pit, and she's used this pit to bring back Batman. I can't say that I was super surprised. The Lazarus pit scrambles his brains, so you have to fight him. You beat him, and then he immediately ends up sacrificing himself. And this actually really annoys me because they keep having him get hurt when he didn't have to. Like, that sword was nowhere near Batgirl. He sacrificed himself for nothing. She was not going to get stabbed. He just threw himself on his sword. Like, I don't... Why would you do that? What possible benefit? That bothers me. You fight Talia al Ghul, And then the Court of Owls shows up. There's so many of them that Batman pilots the Batwing into the Lazarus Pit so that no one else can use it again. I actually think that this scene looks super cool, but I do want to point out that he just kamikazed like an entire den full of people, so like Batman just killed like a lot of people. It's very anti-Batman, but it still looked awesome. So I skipped over the majority of the story. Really, I just focused on the most important parts. In my opinion, the story was good, but very predictable. I knew Batman was coming back from the moment he died, and I'm not exactly a fan of the fact that they killed him off again as soon as he came back. It feels kind of cheap. There are 3 main side missions involving Harley Quinn, Clayface, and Mr. Freeze. I feel like these didn't do all that much, but I found Clayface's story interesting, and Mr. Freeze had some excellent set pieces.
Whatever's causing this is localized at the top. Definitely Freeze's handiwork. I'm going to get close.
Overall, the combat is very fun. The combat is centered around timing your combo inputs for maximum damage and rolling to avoid damage. Characters have light and heavy attacks, ranged attacks, and the option to free aim if you need to hit specific targets. You have 8 special moves and a grab. I will admit, I've been very frustrated by the lack of a parry button in this game, but that might just be because I've played the Arkham games so much. You typically end up fighting large amounts of enemies, 12 or more at a time, and it'll force you to just roll and roll and roll, waiting for an opening to actually attack. You're just running away for the majority of the fight, and it just starts to get a little annoying. Each character specializes in different techniques. Nightwing is a huge team player, with an entire skill tree dedicated to buffing your allies, and even the ability to revive a teammate using one of his darts. He's incredibly fast and jumps far distances in combat. He also has the easiest way to stagger talents. Red Hood is slow, but deals good damage. He has the most powerful ranged attacks, and can do huge damage from a distance. He also has one of the best specials in the game. It's basically a heat-seeking missile that bounces between enemies. He's also the only character that can grab bigger enemies. One of my favorites, Batgirl, is the closest to Arkham Knight Batman. She throws batarangs, hacks equipment, and she has a beatdown ability that does massive damage to individual enemies. Plus, she can self-revive when killed.
Oh yeah.
Lastly, we have Robin. He's meant for stealth and can place traps, do silent takedowns, and turn invisible. He's a lot weaker than the rest, but he has so many more options. There's 4 basic enemies in the game. A sort of run-of-the-mill grunt, a ranged grunt, a medic, and a big brute. There are a few variants on these, but they make a little difference. The League of Shadows has a basic ninja as well as a variant with a large cannon, and very late game, man-bat warriors. Lastly, the Court of Owls has several talons, the casual zombie talon, a brute, and a hunter. Out of all of these, the only ones that really require you to think outside of the box are the Court of Owls enemy types. On the whole, the combat is fun, but it does get a little repetitive. In my opinion, the open world is pretty good. You can go pretty much everywhere from the beginning of the game, however certain places have no real significance until specific story moments are completed. There are several different boroughs that all have different architecture and are home to different gangs. In my opinion, Gotham is beautifully done. The setting is always nighttime, since all your patrolling takes place at night. You return to the Belfry during the day, sort of your hub area. In the Belfry, you can upgrade gear, train, do a boss rush, and interact with the Bat family. I do have to say, although it looks nice, the open world is fairly empty. There's very little incentive to explore, and even after having played through 3 times, there are still areas of the map that I've never had any reason to go to. There are a few collectibles, such as batarangs, hidden caches, plaques, artwork, and Historia Strigidae. I think that's how you pronounce that. Unfortunately, this collecting process is tedious, and the rewards do not seem rewarding for the grind. I collected everything except the Historia Strigidae, as it seemed kind of excessive. But other than that, I had no real desire to investigate the world. I just sort of beelined for the story objectives. In order to move around the city quickly, you can call a bike. It'll decloak next to you no matter where you are, which I think is actually a really neat touch, and it handles so much better than I expected. Although you do have the option to shoot while on the bike when there's not a single moment in the game that you actually need to be able to do that. This leads me to believe that there was meant to be more to the game, but it was cut for the sake of time or costs, maybe. Once you accomplish certain challenges, you unlock a special traversal ability for each character. The Gotham Knights community insists on calling Nightwing's traversal the Fortnite Glider, and, I mean, you can see it, it's literally the Fortnite Glider. This is easily the best traversal ability, though, because you can go straight up, and you can bounce off of walls. You can pretty much go anywhere. Then we have Red Hood's traversal, the Mystical Leap. This is probably the worst. You don't have a lot of control over the movement and it steadily drops, so its true usefulness is when jumping from a very high rooftop, or for a quick rooftop to rooftop traversal. Batgirl uses her cape to glide, and while it's a little clunky, it is a fairly decent traversal option, and I've gotten a lot of good use out of it. She's able to basically glide in a straight direction. She can go up by dive bombing and then pulling up out of it sharply, similar to the Arkham games. Lastly, we have Robin, who actually has a freaking teleporter. That is so cool, and it's actually really useful. It's kind of boring to use, but it can go pretty much anywhere. You just decide where you want to appear, and you just appear there. And if you have a friend, it looks a lot cooler watching someone just disappear and reappear somewhere else. I will say that while these traversals are so neat, they make the bike almost entirely obsolete. Once you get the traverse abilities, there's no reason to use the bike for anything. Like, it's slower, it doesn't go in the air. It's just, yeah, you just don't use it anymore after that point. And I think that's sort of a oversight on the developer's part or something, because it seems bad to have a mechanic that directly ruins another mechanic. There is a fast travel system, and I think it's pretty neat and looks really cool, but you do have to scan all these drones to do it, which is a little annoying, but all in all, it's not that tedious. My only real issue with the open world is that they use it to pad out story time. Every 2 or 3 missions, you have to find this many thugs in this part of the city, and then you have to find this many thugs in this part of the city. It's unnecessary, it's time consuming, and it gets old really, really fast. This game requires you to collect loot to get stronger. You can collect suits, melee weapons, ranged weapons, and mod chips. Gear has a power level, affinity, and individual stats. For example, in Red Hood's inventory, I keep cryo pistols because I like to be able to freeze enemies mid-combo. This gear has different rarities, with gray being the weakest and yellow being the highest. It may not seem like it at first, but gear will determine whether or not your playthrough is slightly challenging or extremely difficult. The most important of all your gear is the mod chips. Each piece of gear can have up to 3 mod chip slots, but 3 isn't super common. Mod chips largely increase your power level. Legendary gear always has 3 mod chip slots, and actually levels up as you use it. I have mixed feelings on the gear system. On one hand, it's done well enough, and the drops are frequent enough that you don't feel like you're constantly grinding for gear. However, you're constantly cycling through all that gear that you get, to the point that all the extra details like status effects don't really matter. You'll just cycle out the next highest gear and keep going. You're only going to really see these status effects in the late game of your New Game Plus. I'm sure you've noticed the gear has different designs, and so I'll use this as a segue to talk about cosmetics. Cosmetic options extend to suits and the bike. There are 14 skins for each character, 11 of which will allow for several adjustments. You can change the cowl, the symbol, gloves, and boots. It's not a lot of changes, but if you mix it up properly, you can come up with a more unique look. You can also swap color palettes. Here are a few examples. Additionally, if you like the gear that you've equipped, but you don't like how it looks, you can select a transmog, which alters your appearance only. However, you cannot adjust a transmog, so you're stuck with whatever colors and cosmetic choices are preset. Some of these look awesome and some are interesting. I'll say that some of these transmogs are less desirable purely on the amount of work required to get them. This one is only unlocked upon collecting all of the batarangs. I did, but I don't suggest it as it's very tiresome. This one is only unlocked from collecting all the talent caches. Also, a small nitpick, but I dislike that the comic book inspired transmogs are the only ones in the game that you pay for. It feels almost like they had the best suit design and then took it away because they knew we would pay for it. Overall, my biggest issue with the game is that it feels, for lack of a better word, stretched. It probably would have been a fun game with not that many drawbacks if they didn't add things like having to search for 60 batarangs, grind mini challenges, constantly search for people. It feels like a lot of busy work. I feel like the game will most be enjoyed by DC fans who have a lot of patience. I think you need to already like the characters and you need to want to like the game, because it's not really the sort of game to change your mind. I liked it though, especially since I played the game with my dad. For maximum enjoyment, you should play with a friend. It did finally get boring for me when I new gamed. There just wasn't enough to keep me playing for a second time. So, in my opinion, the game is not really worth playing multiple times, but it could be a fun experience for one playthrough. I'd maybe get it on sale. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Gotham Knights. If you like the Bat Family, give it a shot. If you don't know what the Bat Family is, don't waste your time. Deuces.